This is the very nearly fairly current show.
Hi, Andrew.
Hello.
Welcome to the Fairly Current Show.
That's great to be here.
Okay. The first thing we want to know, I think all of our audience would like to know, is what is the creative economy?
Well, the creative economy is something that's been around for a long time. It's just things that we've never seen as being part of the economy before. So it's things like advertising and architecture, the performing arts, so drama and dance, but video games, music, all those sorts of things. It's the things where actually the creative spirit comes to life and creates the things which entertain us, amuse us, and make our lives easier in lots of ways and more enjoyable.
What do you mean when you say, there's a definition for the creative entrepreneur?
That's a definition which we've really been developing over the past few years. And it's very much about, we've always had this understanding, I think, that there are artists, there are designers, there are actors and people who kind of create creative work of different sorts. And we've always had an understanding of the marketplace. There are people who consume art, who enjoy art, who go to shows, whatever it may be. But we've never really spent a lot of time thinking about how the work of an artist gets to the marketplace and how that happens. And the people that do that really are creative entrepreneurs. They're the people who can support the talent and see and understand how that local talent needs to be developed, but also understand how the local market works and see where the opportunities are in the marketplace.
But they're not pure businessmen, are they?
Well, they're a mixture of things. I think it depends very much. Some people are artists who are just driven in terms of wanting to get their work into the market and wanting to make sure that they're kind of building their sector in their home country. And in that sense, they can be creative entrepreneurs. But some people are more akin to businessmen. But the key thing about these people is that they do understand the creative spirit. We always talk about creative talent as being like a raw material. Most industries have some sort of raw material they work with. Well, in the creative sector, it's that creative talent. And it's the most difficult raw material to work with in many ways, because it's all about people being driven by an idea and a passion to express themselves. And sometimes you've got to say to somebody, you need to just balance this out. That's not going to work in the marketplace. That's not quite what people are looking for. Have you thought about this? And sometimes that's quite difficult to do. And so you've got to have the skill to be able to work with creative people and help to guide them in that sense, so they're creating things which can find their way into the marketplace more effectively.
Why should countries and cities and people in general just be aware that such a thing as the creative economy exists, and why should they kind of like build it up?
Well, I think there are lots of reasons. One is because it's there, and if you look at the UK as an example, it's an important part of our economy. We didn't realise how important it was until 10 years ago, when we first did this thing which was kind of looking at its economic impact. And the first time we looked at it, it was pretty much 8% of our gross value added, 8% of what the country produces in terms of wealth. And that being the case, and it employs an awful lot of people, we need to think about it seriously. And it's interesting that now, if you look at London, the second most important sector in London is the creative industries, after financial services. And everybody knows that London is one of the most important financial centres in the world. Well, it's also one of the most important creative centres in the world for the creative economy. And whenever we've done this work, and we've done this work in many, many different countries, emerging economies, you'll see that actually the creative sector is there. It's already contributing to the economy. It's just that people aren't recognising it and aren't working with it in that way. They're seeing it as being peripheral.
Why do you think that's the case?
Because we take it for granted. Because we all consume creativity and culture, and we kind of almost see it as being. And it's in a way, it's getting more difficult now because there are so many kind of companies that are kind of seeing it as a great way of marketing. So, for example, lots of kids today don't really think about the cost of going to see a gig or a club, because actually getting in there is something which is being offered to them in some way on a VIP list or whatever it may be. At a very, they go onto the list, they get in for nothing. You download stuff, you get it for nothing. They're not necessarily recognising that there's an artist there who's producing this work. How do you make sure that they're actually making a living from it? Because why on earth would they produce it otherwise?
If we say that to help support and build and kind of like help grow the creative economy, it means that there is some intervention or at least some participation from the state, right? From government agencies, bodies, institutions. Why, if this raw material is already there and there's a certain kind of thing going on already, why should these agencies and institutions why should they get involved?
They need to get involved because at the moment the infrastructure isn't there in many countries to allow the creative economy to really emerge and to prosper. It's about, in many countries, as I said before, in fact, I think it's probably true about all countries, that the creative economy is there and it's working. it's not necessarily working as well as it could do.
Okay.
But government's got to understand how to intervene rather than just intervening. So I'm not suggesting that government needs to just kind of go in there and go, oh, yes, we can make this work. You've got to understand how the sector works before you can understand where to intervene. So it's not just about government intervening, it's about government actually working with people in the sector, with people in academia, kind of looking at kind of where do we go about intervening in the sector? How do we go about getting involved in this to make sure it works better?
And now the most interesting and I guess salient point for us who are viewing this right now, I guess, is in a Malaysian context, and I guess in Southeast Asian kind of context, but specifically in Malaysia. How are the conversations and the discussions about the role and, intervening and also the need for it and rationalizing? How is that conversation going?
Well, for us in Malaysia, it's a relatively new story for the British Council. My colleagues here are starting to talk to people in government. We've been running our awards program in music and now in design for the past few years. So it's a relatively new thing. We've got slightly further in terms of the conversation, say, in Thailand in Bangkok, because we were able to work with, Thailand has this thing called TCDC, the Thailand Centre for Design and Creativity, and they've become a really important partner for us in this conversation, because obviously it's something which they're interested in. So they're a wee bit further down the road than you are, and similarly, this might be surprising to people, but similarly down in Indonesia, again, we've been working there with people. And now you can see that the government in the West Java province, the government in Bandung are really getting interested in kind of what this might mean for that city and that province.
And a lot of it is also an understanding about the need to position a city in a particular way, a particular fashion, right?
It is partly that, yes, because it is about kind of what is enticing about a place. There's no two ways about it that, somewhere like London, a city like Bandung, a city like Sao Paulo, wherever you go in the world, there are cities which have got kind of a wealth of kind of creativity going on there that attract creative people because of the nature of the vibe in that particular place. So, not every place is going to be able to have a really vibrant creative economy. Everyone will have one, but it won't necessarily be that vibrant. But it exists. It does exist everywhere. I mean, if you look at the UK, there is a creative economy in the Highlands and Islands of Scotland. There's a creative economy down in Cornwall in the southwest. They're not the most populated areas of the UK, but it doesn't mean that the creative sector doesn't work there and exist there and thrive there. I'd expect to find, there are remote parts of Malaysia where, in actual fact, in the years to come, we'll understand that there's a vibrant creative economy operating. It's there for everybody in that sense.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Andrew.
Pleasure.
This is the this is the very nearly fairly current show.